Let me introduce myself for those of you who may not have met me yet. My name is Ron Martellino. I am a parishioner at Our Lady of Perpetual Help on Lyons Avenue here. And I have been a catechist for Our Lady of Perpetual Help for the last 17 years. I've been teaching basically all grade levels, but my focus is on junior high and high school confirmation. This is my 10th year in the confirmation. I also teach the pre-baptism classes at our parish, and I've also given other talks and have taught other adult religious education classes as well. I am a master catechist. I don't like to throw that around. It doesn't mean anything except that I had to take a bunch of grueling classes, write a bunch of horrible papers, and I made it. But that I do formation centers as well for the master catechist formation centers. My talk tonight is called Atheism and Relativism, What Really Makes the World Go Round. I'm going to start off with really what brought me back into the Catholic Church after I was lapsed for a lot of years. And I reverted back in 1999, and really what really worked with me was apologetics, is what really brought me back into an understanding of the Catholic faith. I'd like to first start off my talk with a definition of apologetics, because then we're going to move into atheism and relativism. It's going to seem a little disjointed, but I think at the end you'll see how it all comes together. Apologetics. If we were to open up the first letter of St. Peter and turn to chapter 3, we'd find a verse in there, 15 to 16, 2 verses. He says, "Always be ready to give an example to anyone who asks you for a reason for your hope, but do it with gentleness and reverence, keeping your conscience clear, so that when you are maligned, those who defame your good conduct in Christ may themselves be put to shame." Now, in the letter to St. Peter, the word for to give an explanation could also be translated as a word defense, which comes from the Greek word apologia. Apologia is to give that defense, to say why we believe what we believe. What is it about our hope, our reason for what we believe? When we're talking about apologetics, we've got to remember that evangelization is the core of apologetics. And the mission of our church is to evangelize. That's the sole reason why we exist, is to evangelize. So when we talk about apologetics, it's really prepping ourselves to be able to give that good reason for the hope that we have in our faith. Now, there's 3 types of apologetics. There's what we call natural apologetics, there's Christian apologetics, and there's Catholic apologetics. When we talk about natural apologetics, we're talking about truths that we can know from the natural light of reason, truths that we're able to know without any divine intervention, things that are written in our heart, natural law. And then we have Christian apologetics, which of course would build on natural apologetics, whereby we understand who Jesus Christ is as our Savior, Jesus Christ who, the divinity of Christ, the biblical miracles of Christ, the virgin birth of Christ, and also the resurrection of our Lord. And then Catholic apologetics builds upon that and incorporates natural apologetics along with Christian apologetics, and then adds to that the tenets of the Catholic Christian faith, whereby we recognize and know that we are the fullness of the Christian faith. So therefore, we're able to add the sacraments, the holy sacrifice of the Mass, the Immaculate Conception, the papacy, and so forth. Now, we can't use the term prior because without time and space, there's no way to use a word that would encompass that. But for the sake of the English language, I can only say that before the Big Bang, before the point of singularity, before matter of time and space existed, there was nothing. And we all know that nothing can only do nothing. Nothing can't do something in and of itself. Nothing can only do nothing. So I'm going to read, Kevin and I went over this, so he knows what's coming up on this one. St. Thomas Aquinas, he has 5 arguments for the existence of God, and I'm going to read one of the second argument, which is the argument from efficient causes. This is kind of dry and boring, but bear with me, and I swear this is going to get better, okay? I promise you, so keep smiling. Everybody happy? Everybody's good? Okay, good. Keep smiling, because if you smile, I smile. If you don't smile, I fall off the stage. Okay, so argument from efficient causes. This is really cool. I'm going to kind of say it a little slowly so that we can get to it, but we perceive a series of efficient causes of things in this world. Nothing exists prior to itself. If you want me to repeat, just raise your hand and I'll repeat. Therefore, I'll start over again. We perceive a series of efficient causes of things in this world. Nothing exists prior to itself. Therefore, nothing in the world of things we perceive is the efficient cause of itself. If a previous efficient cause does not exist, neither does the thing that results or the effect. Therefore, it is the first thing in a series, therefore, if the first thing in a series does not exist, nothing in the series exists. If the series of efficient causes extends infinitely into the past, for then there would be no things existing now. That's what blew my mind. You have to think about that one. If things are infinitely in the past, they would never be here now. That's false, because we see that there's existing things that came through efficient causes. Therefore, efficient causes do not extend infinitely into the past. Therefore, it's necessary to admit a first efficient cause to which everyone gives the name of God. Now, science is we can only use science as a tool to observe the observable world. We cannot try to use science as a tool to observe the metaphysics. The things that philosophy are the tools to use. And one thing that science cannot answer for us is the question, why did the universe have to exist at all? If nothing does nothing, and prior to the Big Bang, prior to that point of singularity, why did anything have to come to existence at all? And this is an area where no science can answer. There's no microscope or telescope that we can utilize to find the answer to that question. There are many areas of our consciousness that are not observable, and yet we know that we are conscious beings. I just read an article recently that somebody's proposing that the universe has a consciousness. I just read it yesterday. So did you see that? Did somebody else see that? Okay, interesting, yeah. So atheists and agnostics will inherently accept concepts that are beyond the realm of science and yet dance around the why question. One of the funniest things I got that I found pretty humorous was I was talking to an atheist, and he was getting so frustrated, and he asked me, he said, "Why ask why?" I thought that was kind of humorous. Think about it just for a second. Okay, good. Got a couple people chuckling, so that's good. Now, this person was content without understanding why we exist, why humans are so much more advanced than even the next most intelligent species. But he was quick to ask me why evil exists. So does evil exist? Does darkness exist? And what is darkness? It's the absence of light. How many of you are cold today? I was, because I put my air conditioning down to like 72. But what is cold? It's the absence of heat. Cold cannot be measured. When your thermometer goes down, that's showing that the heat is lessening, not that the cold is increasing. And when you're looking at the lights can be measured in lumens, and you'd think as an electrician I would know how you measure light, and I don't remember. But light can be measured, but not the darkness. The darkness is only how much light is not being emitted in a certain area. So when we talk about evil, evil is, again, an absence. It's the very absence of infinite good. Just like if I were to put my hand in front of that light, it would cast a shadow. When something is committed, an act that is committed that is evil, we put our hand in front of the light of infinite goodness. And that shadow that's cast, that effect of that blocking of that infinite good, is what we would call evil. Oops. So what exactly does determine whether an act is moral or immoral? An atheist will admit that if actions result in a person's suffering, then that action is not good and perhaps it's immoral. So let me ask you guys this. If I were to bring my child in to the pediatrician, I was just about to say veterinarian, but that would not be the good place. I was thinking of my little dog, Lucy. If I were to bring my child into the pediatrician's office, and held my child down, which I've had to do, and that child was given a shot for a vaccine, the shot hurt his arm or her arm, and they cried, was that, under that definition, was that an immoral or evil act? Now, what if it wasn't because you were going to say, well, maybe the good that's coming out of that painful shot is what's benefiting my child, so therefore it's a good act. But there are parents, and I've talked to these parents, who believe that vaccinations are not good for their children. They think there's certain ingredients in the vaccination that actually is harmful for their children. Okay? So then does that make, if that child goes in for vaccination, would that make a vaccination period an immoral or evil act? Because not only are they getting a shot in the arm, but they're getting what some people might perceive as not even a good outcome. So when we're looking at this, without God, there can be no objective moral standard. This is the point I'm trying to get to. Because so this brings us to one of the most detrimental, if not one of the most destructive concepts in our society today, and it's moral relativism. It is running rampant. I work at a high school, at Bowman High School. I hear teachers talking, I hear students talking. Relativism is just, it's like a cancer growing through our society. College campuses are just infiltrated with this. When I walked in, Christopher asked me why I had a tape measure on my hip. Yeah, and then someone asked me if I just come from work. Well, if I did come from my job that uses tape measure, it would have been 3 years travel to be here because I retired 3 years ago. But I did, I retired from my electrical trade. In construction, when we build a building, like the building you're in right now, if I were to say to you, you know what, I think we should put this beam right about here, and let's set the next one like maybe here, and then she says, no, I think it should be over here. Oh, okay. Why? Well, if they're closer together, oh, all right. And how about if we put the outlet behind the TV? Let's put, I think it should be over there. And then these lights, why don't we put, instead of right there, let's put it over there. But look what we have. Every construction trade on any construction site has one of these. It doesn't matter what trade you go to, drywallers, who are carpenters, people that lay the carpet layers, plumbers, electricians, masoners. I don't care what trade you have. You might have different sets of tools for the particular trade, but the one thing we share in common is a tape measure. You know why? Because this is the standard by which the entire building will be built. When I get a set of prints, it would say 1/8 of an inch equals 1 foot. There was a scale to the print. And if it said that this beam had to be at exactly 6 feet, whatever it is, 6.5 feet from this beam, whatever it is, the person putting this building together measures 6.5 feet, not 6 feet 7 inches. 6 feet 6 inches, and then so on and so forth. And if I'm supposed to put an electrical outlet right here that's supposed to be 10 feet from the corner, it can't be 10.5 feet, because if it was 10, or let's say it was here, if it was 10.5 feet, then the person who's installing this cover would be right over my outlet. So it has to be here. It can't be just here because I think it'd be pretty cool to put it there. It wouldn't have access. If the people who installed those benches back there decided to make them any size they'd like and then see if it'll fit between the wall there and the wall there, it wouldn't work. We have to use the standard of measurement, which we call inches and feet and yards. If you're using centimeters, you'll have to convert. But we have to be on the same standard. Every trade will be on this standard so that when the building is completed, by the use of inches, and I've actually used micrometers. I've used things that have measured things to thousandths of an inch. In construction, typically, though, unless you're fine-tuning machinery, but in construction, sometimes I've gone down to the 16th of an inch with carpentry. And if I went an eighth of an inch, it would throw something off. So we need a set standard to build a building, but somehow the entire society now thinks that we can build our world with subjective thought. Your truth, my truth, your footage, my footage. It doesn't make a darn bit of difference what standard, because really it's all about your feelings. It's all about not, I took 5 hours writing that thing. It's all about feelings. It's all about wondering whether you're going to offend someone. That's why I brought the tape measure. Never forget the tape measure. It is the standard by which everything is measured in construction, and we need that standard in our world. I'd like to play, boy, time flies when I'm having fun. I'd like to play, and I know most of you have probably heard this, but I'm hoping this will work really quickly. I'm going to just put this little speaker in the middle of the table. I don't know, should I put it where my microphone will kind of hear it, or it should pick it up. Okay, so I'm just going to put that there. I want you guys to hear this. You may have heard it before. In fact, I bet you most of you probably have, but I've listened to it like 5 times just while I was preparing this talk, and I just crack up every time. But now the LTE here, just please, let's see what's, oh yeah, okay. This was on a, okay, let's see if this picks up.
There's been a lot of talk about identity, but how far does it go? And is it possible to be wrong? We went to the University of Washington. Are you aware of the debate happening in Washington State around the ability to access bathrooms, locker rooms, spas based on gender identity and gender expression?
I think people should be able to have access to the facility.
I think bathrooms could and potentially should be gender neutral because there doesn't need to be a classification for differences.
I think people definitely should have the ability to go into whichever locker room they want.
I feel like at least public universities should do their best to accommodate for those who do not have a specific gender identity.
You know, whether you identify as male or female and whether your sex at birth is matching to that, you should be able to utilize the resources.
So if I told you that I was a woman, what would your response be?
Good for you, okay. Like, yeah.
Nice to meet you. I'd be like, what? Really?
I don't have a problem with it.
I'd ask you how you came to that conclusion.
If I told you that I was Chinese, what would your response be?
I mean, I might be a little surprised, but I'd say, good for you. Like, yeah, be who you are. I would maybe think you had some Chinese ancestor.
I would ask you how you similarly came to that conclusion and why you came to that conclusion.
I would have a lot of questions, just because on the outside I would assume that you're a white man.
If I told you that I was 7 years old, what would your response be?
People are clueless.
I wouldn't believe that immediately.
I probably wouldn't believe it, but I mean, it wouldn't really bother me that much to go out of my way and tell you, no, you're wrong. I'd just be like, oh, okay, he wants to say he's 7 years old.
If you feel 7 at heart, then then so be it. Yeah, good for you.
So if I wanted to enroll in a first grade class, do you think I should be allowed to?
Probably not, I guess. I mean, unless you haven't completed first grade up to this point and for some reason you can do that now.
If that's where you feel like mentally you should be, then I feel like there are communities that would accept you for that.
I would say so long as you're not hindering society and you're not causing harm to other people, I feel like that should be an okay thing.
If I told you I'm 6 feet 5 inches, what would you say?
That I would question.
Why?
Because you're not. No, I don't think you're 6'5". If you truly believe you're 6'5", I don't think it's harmful. I think it's fine if you believe that. It doesn't matter to me if you think you're taller than you are.
So you'd be willing to tell me I'm wrong?
I wouldn't tell you you're wrong.
No, but I say that I don't think that you are.
I feel like that's not my place as like another human to say someone is wrong or to draw lines or boundaries.
No, I mean, I wouldn't just go like, oh, you're wrong, like, that's wrong to believe in it, because, I mean, again, it doesn't really bother me what you want to think about your height or anything.
So I can be a Chinese woman.
You,
It's like, no, you can't, but I don't want to
sure.
offend you.
But I can't be a 6'5" Chinese woman.
If you thoroughly debated me or explained why you felt that you were 6'5", I feel like I would be very open to saying that you were 6'5", or Chinese, or a woman.
It shouldn't be hard to tell a 5'9" white guy that he's not a 6'5" Chinese woman. But clearly it is. Why? What does that say about our culture? And what does that say about our ability to answer the questions that actually are difficult?
Have any of you heard this before?
You got to count the number of times they said feel. They'd rather not offend people.
Yes.
Turn that into
Yes.
again.
I'm sorry? Wait, I didn't hear.
They'd rather not hurt people's
Oh.
feelings than tell them the truth. It's insane.
What is truth? In the Gospel of John, we hear Pontius Pilate ask an incredibly profound question. So Pilate said to him, "Then you are a king." Jesus answered, "So you say I am a king. For this I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice." And Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" Pilate didn't ask him what is the truth. He asks what all of us are asking even to this day: what is truth? In John 14:6, Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." He didn't say he was one path of many, had great suggestions, and you can live with whoever you think is wisest eternally. According to Webster, who wrote the dictionary, we see that truth is simply the property of being in accord with fact or reality. And today we're finding that relativism is the biggest obstacle to finding truth when answering questions regarding faith, morals, and life's meanings. I worked with a guy. We were putting in outlets together, working side by side. And we were talking about his going to his church. He goes to Calvary Chapel. And we were discussing Christianity. And he said, somehow Islam came into the conversation. And I said, yeah. I said, it's unfortunate that they don't know Christ. He goes, it's not unfortunate. I said, well, what do you mean? He goes, well, if you're born in Muslim faith, then you're Muslim. Okay, all right, but what does that do with Christ's identity and who he is? Well, that's our truth as Christians. That's our truth. Muslims have their truth, and we have our truth. And I wasn't even really back into the faith yet. I was just perplexed. Well, no. I mean, like if I'm standing here on a podium, this is true. I mean, I'm standing here. You could tell me I'm floating on a cloud, but I'm not. In reality, I'm standing on a podium. But he was convinced that if you have your truth and your truth makes you happy, then you don't need to worry about anyone else's truth. Or is there an absolute objective truth? I'm trying to keep an eye on the clock here, and I'm trying to make sure that I don't go too much over. But I do want to talk about a couple of things. Are we good? Are we good? You're okay with that? Everybody good? Okay. If you have to bolt out, go ahead. Then I'll add a couple more things. I'll continue here. So basically, relativism is the notion that there is no absolute truth. That rather, the truth differs with each individual or from society to society, different cultures. And as far as... what's true for me is true for me, and what's true for someone else is true for someone else. It's really self-defeating, because the very statement that nothing is true for anyone may not be true for everyone. Pope Benedict XVI said that relativism, which recognizes nothing as definitive, leaves as ultimate criterion only the self with its desires. The compass of a moral relativist can point nowhere else but to himself. In our Catholic Christian faith, we have what's known as the 5 non-negotiable moral standards. The 5 non-negotiables are abortion, euthanasia, embryonic stem cell research, human cloning, and homosexual marriage. When we talk about 5 non-negotiables, we're meaning exactly that. They're non-negotiable. They're intrinsically evil by the very nature of what they are. Let's focus on one of these, because I've talked to so many people about this topic, and that's abortion. A relativistic society is not able to recognize that there are objective principles involved in realizing the dignity of the human person. And so the concept of human dignity, again, becomes subjective. And human rights have no solid basis and can be determined merely by a majority vote, to which has been evidenced by abortion being legalized in the United States. It really boils down to what the definition of wrong is. If nothing can be objectively true, then nothing can be objectively wrong. In the case of abortions, I actually wrote this. This is from a book, by the way. This is my own speak. It just helps me to get things in. I've had numerous discussions with relativists, and it must be underscored that not all relativists are atheists or agnostic. Yes, we have many Christians and even some Catholic Christians who are relativists, who subscribe to this type of thinking. But here's a couple of things about abortion that I've talked to many people about. But this is couple of things that kind of thread through the topic. I do accept that abortion is murder, but the mother's life is most important since she is independent of any other human, and this fetus is dependent upon her. Therefore, she should have the right to decide to abort her fetus for any reason. This type of thought hangs on the subjective definition of the dignity of the human person. The relativist can look at the mother's life as being of greater value than that of the child's, for whatever reason they choose, because remember, it's relative. And so they'll look at the mother and say, she's worth more than that child. So therefore, if something were to come in her life as an inconvenience, it's okay to eliminate the child, because that child is not worth more or even equal to the mother. The second thing we get is the fetus is not a human person until, put your own fill in the blank here, until, insert your subjective opinion there, and therefore no killing takes place and no person is murdered for some time, that is after the time of the birth. For this really is like the number one comment I get from those who identify as pro-choice. Even with four-dimensional ultrasounds, I mean, you can go in now and you can see that baby. You can see the heart beating. You can see, and we have DNA. I mean, we know it's a human organism. I mean, you'd have to be absolutely, you'd have to have your head really in the sand not to look at a fetus. I mean, I'm not expecting, I'm not really, but we are as a family. We're expecting my fourth grandchild in December. My granddaughter will be born around December 22nd, and we saw her ultrasounds, and that's a baby. That's a baby. In fact, I tell people now I have 4 grandchildren. Okay? That's my grandchild. It's not a fetus. That's a potential human life. But we look at, for me, this really demonstrates the root of relativism, which is really rebellion. It's really saying I'm going to place something of convenience ahead of a human life. It really is the basis of relativism, where we're looking at what is it really, what is it really that's there for me rather than the good of someone else. Okay. Let's just talk a little bit about tolerance. I'm going to try to, like I said, I'm trying to move along here. But we talk about tolerance. If you don't accept, homosexual marriages, you're intolerant, and you're hateful. Ever hear the Catholic Church hates homosexuals? Has anybody ever heard that before? Yeah, I know. I get it all the time in my classes. Okay. I don't know where that comes from, because if the Catholic Church hates homosexuals, first of all, there's a difference between a homosexual person and a homosexual act. But if the church hated people who acted in homosexual ways, they would have to really clear out their entire congregation, because we all sin, and we would all have to be hated by the Catholic Church, and that's not why Jesus came. Okay? But we look at tolerance. This tool that's used to dissemble the person who believes in absolute moral truth. So I say, we have to look at the word tolerance and say, if I'm going to say I'm tolerating something, that presupposes that I disagree with it, right? Okay, that means I don't agree with it. I wouldn't say I'm tolerant of something that you don't tolerate something that you're agreeing with. You know, I don't say I'm tolerating a beautiful, sunny day. You say I'm tolerating, this horrible weather with my rain umbrella flying in the wind and everything. I'll tolerate this, but you don't tolerate things you agree with or you like. But what happens here, and we should note as Christians that Jesus Christ himself was the most tolerant person to ever exist. He tolerated because tolerance means that you continue to always love and give the respect and dignity to the human person, all while disagreeing with the things that go against the objective moral code of ethics. When we're being intolerant, we're not being intolerant of the human being, of the person. We're being intolerant of their actions. And it's very important that we understand that, because many times we get accused by relativists as being intolerant, meaning that we hate certain groups of people. Not that we disagree with the acts of what they're doing. I don't know where I am here. Okay. Relativists want to convey that tolerance means that we should never disagree with anyone on moral or faith issues. In contrast, for us, tolerance means that we are putting up with something that we disagree with, we don't agree with. All right, so we have to really watch it when we're trying to not hurt people's feelings. That's important. But I want to move on just really quickly. I want to go through these, and then I think we'll get close to where we're going to wrap. But so what really makes our world go round? Yeah, what really makes our world go round? He said gravity. Actually, in the sense of atheism and moral relativism, we're going to move away from the science, which is correct, and say that actually we make the world go round. We do. Just as there are many who deny the Holocaust and the moon landing, there will be many who will deny absolute truth. People deny God, they deny Jesus, human rights, and even scientific evidences upon many topics. This is our world, and we live in it. What we as Catholic Christians do know for certain is that every one of the 7 billion plus humans that inhabit this planet are made in the image and likeness of God. God gave us all free will to exercise, and this was exhibited best by Jesus Christ when he was crucified and allowed the greatest evil in human history to bring about the greatest good. So when we look at the devastating effects of relativism on society, we must be willing to realize that the only person we can change is who? Ourselves. That's right. So let's ask ourselves, now you don't have to answer this, this is just reflecting. How am I doing? I'm going to ask some questions, just reflect on for yourself. When I teach the junior high kids, or even when I teach my baptism classes with the adults in there, sometimes they'll raise their hand and want to share things that they really didn't need to share with the group, but that's okay. Are all of my decisions based on the objective moral code of ethics given to us by God? That's really a start for us, because if we are not convicted, and we are not really, entrenched in our knowing that there is an objective moral standard, there is that standard by which all standards are measured. Do we use that standard when we make our decisions? When I speak about topics such as abortion or the other non-negotiables, am I making statements like, well, I believe that? Or am I being straightforward, expressing objective truths? Abortion is murder. I wouldn't go outside and say, I believe that tree has leaves on it. When you know something, you don't express it with some type of doubt, a little bit of like, well, I believe it does. When you say, I believe it does, then you're opening up for, what do you believe? Now, I know the creed says, I believe in one God, and that's our creed, and I understand, but what I'm saying, we have to show conviction when we're talking about the things that we're holding as absolute moral truths. You don't want to be, well, I think that it should be like this because. No, abortion is murder. Someone says, what's your position on abortion? It's murder. Well, maybe it's, no, it is. Well, that's your opinion. No, it's not my opinion. It is. It's ending a life of a child, and so forth. And so when we conduct our conversing with others, are we making sure that we're doing it in a very objective way? Remember, Jesus never spoke about what he believed. He exhorted us to do what's loving, thus being right. Jesus never said, oh, maybe you guys could do this. Or whatever. No, he said, this is what you do. Unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink my blood. And with that statement, guess what? He lost all the people that were standing there except his 12. But everybody else walked away. He was not worried about offending anyone. They walked away. Then he turned to Peter and he said, at the risk of losing all his disciples, he turned to Peter and he says, or turned to the 12 actually, turned to the 12 and he said, do you also want to go? In other words, this is me talking here. I am the truth. I'm not telling you something that's subjective, or I'm not open for your opinion. I'm telling you, you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you have no life in you. And the other said, this saying is hard, who can accept it? They walked away. He turns to the 12 and he says, do you also want to leave? And Peter said, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. Jesus never taught subjectively. Jesus always corrected people. Do I see other Christian faiths as all having the fullness of truth? Or do I know that Jesus founded the Catholic Church, and while many have partial truths, we have the fullness of truth? We have to be convicted of that. So many times people say, well, I went to this non-denominational Christian church, and they're pretty awesome, and they have communion too. I've had so many people tell me that. Do we know? Are we knowing who we are as Catholic Christians? Am I willing to be ridiculed and even shunned by those who may not agree with me and still be willing to love them? Remember, you can only love Jesus as much as the person you love the least. Remember, I wrote that here. That includes pro-choice women who recently had an abortion and is willing to have more. We have to love that woman. We're called to. The atheist who says you're being ridiculous for believing in an invisible God. We have to love that person. So I'm going to close up with some final quotes. And I understand there will be a follow-up on July 16th. We will have a follow-up. But I'm going to just read a few final quotes. I was going to tell you a conversion story of a gentleman I worked with who was a staunch atheist and became a Christian 3 months after we spoke. It was amazing. Are we good with that? All right, then let's do it. Okay, so this might take about 5 minutes. We're good? All right. So there's this man, his name's Robert, and I'm still friends with him today. I retired 3 years ago, like I said, but we keep in touch. He was a staunch atheist for 42 years. We were having lunch. We sit in a circle where we were in the warehouse at the time. We were sitting in a circle, and he grinded his finger practically off his thumb, and he put this thing on it, and his finger was healing up. This is pertinent to the story, by the way. His finger was healing up. So we're sitting in a circle, and it's November of, I want to say 2011. It was just around Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
there you go. And so we're talking, and I asked him if he was putting up Christmas lights, and he said, no, I don't put up Christmas lights. He goes, I don't believe in Christmas. I don't believe in God and all that stuff anyways. Then he got up and he said, you know what, I don't care what any of you think of me. That's just the way I am. I've been that way all my life, and I don't care. He walked away. In the middle of lunch, got up and walked away. I thought, wow, okay. Oh, the thing about the ointment, he says, he pulls up his bottle of ointment for his finger, goes, this is what I believe in. This is the miracle that worked for my thumb. And then he walked away. About, I don't know, few days later, I was, this is an interesting thing. I always left the warehouse and exited the building a certain route. I always took a certain route because it was the shortest route out, and when you're done with work, you want to get out of there. So I took the shortest route out. But this particular day, for some unknown reason, Lord, I walked past his area in the shop where he works. He was the tool guy. He would repair tools. I don't know why I took that route. I do now. I didn't know then. I was like, why am I taking this route? I walked past his area, and he said, hey, Ron, he said, could you come here just for a second? I said, sure, Robert. He goes, I have a question for you. And there's this drill motor all disassembled. I'm thinking, please don't ask me how to put this thing back together again. I mean, there's springs in it. He says, you know how you talk to people at your church? Would you be willing to speak with me? And I said, yeah. I said, when do you want to talk? You know, he says, how about Monday? This was Friday. He goes, how about Monday? I said, sure. So all weekend I'm thinking, you know, in my theological mind, okay, I'm going to talk to him about this and creation and Big Bang, and if you put 1,000 paint cans in a garage, you throw a bomb in there, you're not going to get a beautiful painting of whoever you want. You know, and I got all these things in my mind, right? I got all these things I'm going to tell him. So I meet him that day, first thing in the morning, and he says to me, he walks up to me and he says, Ron, if you could tell me one thing for me to believe in God, what would that be? And I thought, oh, dear Lord, if I ever needed you, I need you now, but I know he needs you more than I do. So I looked at him and I said, well, I know how much you love your kids. And I like to think that my children were created from an infinite loving God. And through his love, gave my children an ultimate purpose, gave my children the image and likeness of the ultimate love that created them, and that they're made of a lot more than just the chemicals that are in their bodies. That's why I believe in God. Now, I walked away and I thought, Ron, you are so stupid. I mean, there were like probably 1,000 other answers you could have given him, but you told him that? Love? Seriously? And then, actually, I'm sorry, I misspoke. That happened the day before. That was before, actually. That was a couple days after he took off from the meeting, from the lunch meeting. And then after that is when he asked me to speak with him. And then I went into his room already that Monday morning to tell him about the creation stories. So I'm sitting there, and it's 11 o'clock. But see, this is what happened the Sunday before. The Sunday before, I was kneeling down after I received communion. I was kneeling down in my pew. I closed my eyes, and in my mind's eye, and I didn't have visions, I didn't see an apparition or anything, but in my mind's eye, I saw Robert's face. I saw his face, and I was like, okay, well, I must really be thinking about him, you know. His face was like right there. So I'm driving to work, thinking about us, and in my mind, I kept saying, you've got to tell Robert about seeing his face. Oh, no, that would be like absolutely absurd. He would laugh me out of his work area and say, yeah, Ron, okay, good, and never mind, I'll stay where I'm at. So lunch was 11 to 11:30. I go in there, I start talking about the paint cans and creation and Big Bang and nothing before something. And he's sitting there listening to me, And in my mind, it kept saying, Ron, shut up and tell him about seeing his face. And so I was like, oh my God, I can't. So now it's 11:25. I've got 5 minutes left before my lunch is over. I said, okay. I said, all right. Robert, I said, I've got to just share something with you. I said, and if you want to laugh, that's okay. I said, but I just got to share this. He goes, go ahead. I said, okay. Yesterday I was at Mass. And he knows what Mass is because he was actually in the Catholic Church for a little bit as a child. Never believed, but went to Mass. But anyway, he knew at Mass. So I said, I was at Mass yesterday. I said, after communion, I closed my eyes. I said, and I saw your face in my mind's eye. All of a sudden, he started to cry. And I was like, now, he was going through a very, very bad divorce at that moment in time as well. And he said, what time did that happen? I said, well, I was at the 8:30 Mass, communion. I go, probably like right around, 9:10, 9:15, right around there. He goes, oh my goodness. He goes, I got to show you something. And he pulled out of his back pocket a letter, and he opened it up, and he wrote a poem that was really beautifully written, and I'm not going to try to repeat it, but it was basically like, this is the most beautiful day of my life. I'm looking up at the clouds now, and for some reason, this day is going to be the most special day ever. And it was a long poem. He read the whole thing to me. And he said, I wrote this yesterday at 9:15. And from that point on, he started to talk with me. And I didn't talk about paint cans anymore. I started talking about Jesus Christ and why I believe he is who he is. And 3 months later, in February of 2012, I wish it was a Catholic church, because what he did was he ran to the closest church he could find to his house and got baptized. Okay? It was the North Valley Community Christian Church in Van Nuys or whatever it is where he lives. But needless to say, he went from a staunch atheist because of the workings of the Holy Spirit, and because when we're called to do something, do it. however crazy it seems. Okay, just do what how the Lord prompts you. So that was amazing. I mean, when you get in these times, when you are able to have the opportunity to become an instrument of God like that, it just blows my mind. And then he was playing Christian music in the warehouse for months and months every day after that. And I was like, oh my goodness, I don't know if this is great but yeah, it was like, constant. He had 2 songs that he loved, and I heard them a million times. Just real quickly, a couple of quotes, and then I'll close it up. This is a British rabbi. He said, we should challenge the relativism that tells us there is no right or wrong when every instinct of our mind knows it is not so and is a mere excuse to allow us to indulge in what we believe we can get away with. A world without values quickly becomes a world without value. Winston Churchill said, men stumble over the truth from time to time, but most pick themselves up and hurry off as if nothing happened. And then this came from a science fiction writer. I don't even know who he is, but when I read this quote, I was like, this kind of sums it up. You've heard him say it? Pain's the only evil I know about. You heard that? The monk nodded solemnly. And that society is the only thing that determines whether an act is wrong or not? That too? Monk said, yes. Dearest God, how did those 2 heresies get back into the world after all this time? Hell has no limited imaginations down there? The serpent deceived me, and I did eat. Relativism started in the Garden of Eden. As soon as Adam and Eve realized they had their truth when they listened to the serpent. And it has continued now throughout the ages of time. And now it is just growing rampant. So I'm hoping that maybe at our discussion we can discuss a little bit about maybe some of the things we can do, some of the, or if you have any questions, and I'd like to open up. I was kind of hoping to have a little more dialogue here tonight. I really, really was. But it's like, wow, it just flew by. But I saw all of you like wanting to say something, or so I'm hoping that we'll all meet and we'll be able to have our further discussion. I think it's on July 25th we can do that. And so I thank you all for having me here tonight. This was my first time at Theology on Tap. I hope I did something okay for somebody because I had no idea what to expect. But this is awesome. I'm hoping maybe in the future that maybe, if you're ever in need of a speaker, you guys can send me a topic and we'll talk about it. So again, thank you. God bless all of you. And I know most of you, so I'll see those of you who I've just met tonight. It's great meeting all of you. And I think that's it. Thank you, guys. All right. I'll grab my little speaker.